His name is Josh Goldman. He is a proud UCLA Bruin, a segment producer for The Herd with Colin Cowherd on Fox Sports Radio and obviously FS1. He is the brains behind the operation, one of many who helped put on what is the best radio show, sports radio show in the country today. He joins me. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio. A chance to peer into the perspective of Josh and look through his lens of what he does and how he's got to where he has in his life and the struggles he's overcome to get to where he is today. Let's start here, Josh. How does Colin challenge you in growing you as a producer?
That's something he does like every single day. So one of the things I'm in charge of is called Best for Last, the last segment we do. And it's like a creative show or a creative segment that ties in something we're hitting on earlier that day. And it's like a tough sell because it's got to be like a specific thing. It's not like the rest of the show where, he's just ranting. It's something like a game or like a ranking or a list or something like that. And Colin's pretty picky on those kind of things. So I'm just pitching him at the end of the meeting, like, hey, how about this for Best for Last? And sometimes he's like, nah, we got something better. Come on, challenge. He challenges me. Something he does on the show a lot during the meeting is he'll get picky with topics, he says. So we'll be moving along pretty smoothly. And we're probably like an hour left in the meeting and we're almost done with the prep. And he'll be like, we should get picky now. We've got a whole bunch of good stuff. Let's dig a little deeper. And, it makes us work a little and find that little extra thing. And he likes to challenge us a lot. And it's good. You want that.
When do you feel like the concepts that you bring up most coalesce with what he's looking for?
I think it takes some time of just figuring out what Colin likes and what he's most comfortable with. And there's like certain things that, maybe he's just not going to hit on. Maybe it's just something that the show normally doesn't hit on, or just maybe our viewers are just not interested in. But like, I think it took me some time to figure out like what Colin really likes and doesn't like. And that's something I tell actually our interns and our new hires is just like, the easiest thing for your job or going forward is figuring out Colin, and then the rest will follow.
So those meetings and developing that rapport with them, take us into what those are like as far as what it's like from your perspective.
Yeah, I tell my friends it's kind of like a movie pitch where you're like in the room with like Martin Scorsese, but there's like 30 other people in there trying to pitch in. And it's like everyone respects each other and you're gonna step on some toes, but like we're trying to get the job done and we only have a limited time to figure out what we're going to talk about for 3 hours. So we're in there pitching, talking, trying to help give Colin, analogies and stats and things to say and way to tie in these topics. Like nobody else in sports can tie Microsoft to Tom Brady better than Colin. And so that's what we're trying to do when he, needs help. And that's the way I look at it. It's like, I might not agree with some of the stuff he says, but that's not my job. Like, I'm a huge Packer fan and Colin is not the biggest Aaron Rodgers guy, but that's not my job is to make Aaron Rodgers good in Colin's eyes. My job is to help support Colin's argument of why Aaron Rodgers might not be good on that day.
So no one might be able to connect Microsoft to Tom Brady as well as Colin does, and nobody might not know stats as well as you do. You've worked in that realm. You're very good in stats and figures. What spawned your love affair with numbers and how it relates to sports?
Honestly, I was very good at math. This is going to be the weirdest story, but like as a kid, I grew up in Chicago and Michael Jordan was my hero, is my hero still to this day. And I remember reading this article about him, and it was his favorite subject in school was math. So like literally that day, math became my favorite subject in school. And I just really wanted to get better at it because it was like Michael Jordan's favorite thing. So it's got to be my favorite thing. And I just really did well with math and numbers. And then, I played sports a lot growing up. So just tied in. And then when I got the job at Fox, I started as a researcher for a while. And it just all worked it's funny how everything works out sometimes. So that's just how it did. I got lucky.
No, I think you put in the work, and good things happen to hardworking, good people like yourself. Before you got to Fox, you were a math instructor.
I
So
was. Wow, you did
how
some
does a
good
math
research.
instructor go from teaching math to working on the premier sports radio show in the nation?
That's quite the leap. Yeah, I was a math tutor in college and in the end of high school. And when I graduated, I was still doing it because, you got to pay rent. And I applied for some jobs. And this job I applied for, I wasn't really qualified for, but it was through a company called Stats Inc. And the guy called me on the phone and he's like, "Hey, you're not qualified for this position, but you're from this like town not too far from me," and me and him connected. And he's like, "Hey, we're actually going to be hiring for Fox in a couple months. Reach out." And I did. A couple months later, I called him. I was running out of money, and yeah, I was like, "Hey, like you hiring?" And he's like, "Yeah, actually, we're going to start hiring for Fox right now." And so I started. The position was for a researcher for Fox Sports, and I had no idea what show or what it was because it was for the launch of the network. And we had to do like a sports math test and a sports knowledge test, which is something you would think you would do with all your friends. And I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a job. How awesome is that?" And luckily for me, they hired me, and I did pretty well on that test, and worked my way up. So it's going pretty well. I can't complain.
What did they ask you on the test as far as questions?
It was funny because like it was a general like sports thing, but Colin obviously really only talks about football and basketball, but it was like, who is the reigning Daytona 500 champion, and like calculate the ERA for this pitcher if he gave up this many runs and this many innings over this many starts. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do that. But there was some like weird ones, not weird ones, but like more niche sports that I had no idea, and I was like, all right, if they're covering this, then maybe I'm a little bit in trouble. But uh, I think a couple people got those wrong.
Since then, you have found your niche at Fox and being at the Fox lot. When you walked into the Fox lot for the first time, what was that like? Taking all that in, processing that.
That's a funny story, actually. So, the first day, I was walking around, and this was right before we were launching. So, like, people were coming in for auditions, and I grew up in Chicago, but like I said earlier, I'm a Packer fan. And Brian Urlacher comes around, and he's like in this meeting with me, and I'm like shake his hand, and like, you can imagine like this big Hall of Fame linebacker just like crushing your hand, and I'm like, oh my god, this is crazy. And then we met some of the other FS1 talent, and the lady who hired me, Stephanie, is like, oh my god, you want to meet LeBron? And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like this is like the best day of my life. And as a huge basketball fan, and we like turned the corner, and it was just some other guy named LeBron. I was like, what a tease. But it was still pretty fun. It was very shell shocking. Like, I'm sure for you, like these guys you worship and like look up to, and now you're like coworkers with them.
Who had the biggest effect on you, from a guest that came in, from somebody you had followed growing up that you got to meet while at Fox?
I think Allen Iverson was definitely like the biggest deal. Like where I was like, oh my god, if I could get a picture, I would love it, but I'm not going to be that person to ever ask. And somebody who I think we both know, Dave Coelho,
Oh
was just
yeah.
yeah. So he was just around, and like he knew like I'm a huge basketball guy, and he just like took like a candid photo, so that was pretty dope. But like growing up as a Packer fan, Greg Jennings was, a guy I remember watching the Super Bowl and him dominate, obviously the Madden meme. And, he became a big contributor on Fox. And, we have a friendship, and we're supposed to be always playing basketball, but he always dips out. So I don't know if he still can ball, but he's definitely working out. But another one was Chris Broussard. Chris Broussard was a guy idolized growing up. Like, I don't know if I ever wanted to be the person breaking stories, but like a guy that was just at every NBA game. I was like, oh, this has got to be the dream job. And now we're like good friends, and I've, played basketball with him plenty of times, and we were Culver City champs. Every time we talk, he's like, "You still playing?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm not gonna retire." And he's like, "I think I'm retired, but you never know."
Chris Broussard is such an awesome human being.
Yeah.
He really cares about people, and he has really like a soft spot in his heart for those who work their what's off like you. And I have the opportunity at times to like do updates during his show, like I did yesterday as we taped this on a Thursday. And he's just always so kind. And he always talks about from time to time his basketball games. So what is his trademark move on the court? Because
Oh,
he talks a big game, but I've yet to see it in person.
he's good. Like, I'm not saying he's an NBA player, but like I've played with some talent, let's say, and non-athletic talent. But he's got that old man game. Like, and I'm not calling him old, but like he would be the first one to admit, like, he's got that elbow, the pump fake. Like, he loves the mid range. Like, his game is super like illegal basketball now. Like, he would be off the court because every coach would be like, "Why are you shooting long twos?" But like he'd get to the free throw line. He's and him as like a motivational guy. Like, he would be like, "All right, let's go, let's get a bucket," and we would. And he could play some lockup defense. We played 1-on-1, and he beat me. I'm not ashamed to admit that.
It's also harder to find somebody who puts more work into their craft than Chris Broussard as far as research and studying and be adequately prepared for what he does on the radio side, also the TV side. And for a while, you and Chris worked together on a podcast.
We did.
So I'd love to hear what that dynamic was like and how both of you worked together to make that possible.
Yeah, so we clicked when he started joining the FS1, and as a big basketball guy, I got paired with him because I was working on multiple shows at the time. So like every show he was on, like it was my job to like meet with him and make sure if he needed stats or like wanted to go over topics. And as you know, Chris is somebody who's like very thorough and does all of his prep and homework. And so I spent a lot of time with him, and they were launching a podcast for him, and it was like a natural fit of like, hey, let's get Goldie on this. And one day I just came to like the production that day, and they're like, "Oh, you're going to be on the show from now on." I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, we want you as like a middleman between you and him and J-Mac. Like, you guys have such a good rapport. Like, let's just put you on there." I'm like, "Okay." And that was like a dream come true. And I wish it was still going on, but maybe we can work together on a podcast in the future.
No doubt. So you had the opportunity to work with him. You called it a dream come true. How young were you when you first started idolizing Chris or watching his work on television and reading what he was putting out there?
I mean, I think definitely when I was like middle school.
To think you would be working
Yeah,
with him.
it's crazy. Like 15 years ago, I remember watching Chris Broussard and seeing him on the sideline reporters, and just like I tell my friends that, and I tell like my interns that, like, it, like, don't forget, like, this is a job people would like die for, pay for, and it's just something that don't ever take for granted. And it's just like Broussard, like we just talked about, like I was 15 years old watching him, and now we like work together and text. And I was joking with him the other day about Top Shots, and he didn't know what that was.
What's the element of your work right now that you don't take for granted?
Honestly, I think it's just, as cheesy as this is going to sound, is just like being in the sports industry. Like, I love what I do, and like coming into work every single day, it might be early for most people, and it is pretty early. So sleeping in today to 7 was a nice treat. But it's I get to talk about football and basketball every single day, and like we all have days where we don't love our job or something goes wrong, and that's just something I try to remember all the time. It's just like, I'm getting paid to talk about football and basketball every single day. There are worse things in the world.
As big as you are with stats, and we're talking with Josh Goldman, segment producer for the Herd with Colin Cowherd. I'm Bryan Fenley. What's a stat that you think defines you? That, like, if there was a stat out there to say, yeah, this is me, what would that be? Or
Oh
describes
man.
you the right way?
I don't know, honestly. That's a good one. We did do some like NBA comparisons for ourselves on the show the other day, and the other producer that me and him both line produce, and he's was like, you need somebody with a little more assists. So I like to think the assists, like, maybe I'm Chris Paul, Cliff Paul, born to assist, but I look out for others. Like, I try to make everyone else, help out somebody else. You know, I can get my shots up, but like I get more satisfaction from somebody else getting a bucket. And it's kind of like that when I'm playing basketball. One of my friends once said, like, your personality is like how you play basketball. And not just me, but like he was saying that about everyone. He's like, if you're an alpha, you're going to be an alpha on the court. And I'm like, that's kind of true.
But the way in which you set people up, more than basketball, this goes into your whole personality. Where did you get that understanding that it's not always about me, and that it's important to really help others and be an assist man along the way?
I think it just growing up in the Midwest, there's a different, I'm not saying better, but like there's different values and camaraderie and like looking out for each other, and the wholesome of the Midwest, and Midwest nice is a saying for a reason. And just seeing like, hey, like you can't really do everything by yourself, and it's easier to get through things together. And like, again, this is sounds pretty corny, but it's just like it's just something where I grew up where like it was I would see somebody help somebody and I'd be like, oh, that is how it should be. And it's just like you need to be looking out for somebody because you don't know what they've been through. You don't know what they got going on. And like you can help them out. Like you never know. And like I'm a big believer in like, karma. So like if you do something good's gonna happen to you.
Who is your biggest motivating force?
This is gonna surprising, but it's somebody I've barely ever met, but I touched on it a little bit earlier, Michael Jordan. And so like as funny as that's going to sound, like most people would choose a parent or like a teacher or something, but like it was this guy that honestly I've never really even had a conversation with in my whole life, but I've like seen him my whole life. But as I don't know if but like I didn't have a father growing up, so like he became like this father to me, and it was just like this guy where you worship, and it was like like Mike was a Gatorade commercial, and it honestly became like a way of life for me, where like Michael Jordan was like the way I think Oprah said it, like you're the Michael Jordan of something. And so like I wanted to be the Michael Jordan of whatever I wanted to do. Like I didn't want to, be up all night in Vegas and gambling and whatever, but like I wanted to do the best I could. And like, something we probably all learned from The Last Dance was just like Michael Jordan might have not been the most talented, but he definitely put in the most work. And that's why we had, Kobe and the Moby or the Mamba mentality. It's just like and you touched on it earlier again, like if you put in that time and that work, good things are gonna happen.
I lost my dad when I was a teenager to cancer, and I still think about him every day, and just those loved ones that are not still around, how big of motivating forces that they can be. When
Yeah.
you get the opportunity, and I say when you get the opportunity to meet Michael Jordan, if you have not already, but when this happens again, or if it's going to happen for the first time later on in your life, what are you going to say to him for him to know the effect he had on your life?
Honestly, I think I would just say thank you. Like he wouldn't need to go into like I wouldn't really even need to go into detail. Like, he probably wouldn't ever remember me. And like, I've crossed paths because I have a funny story if you want to get to
Yeah,
that in a
let's hear it.
second. So growing up, in a different magazine about Michael Jordan, not to be a stalker, it said Michael Jordan delivered or gave out his own Halloween candy. And so every year and growing up in Illinois, me and like a couple friends would go to Michael Jordan's house for Halloween. And so to this day, I still have the candy in my room because my mom always was like, if you don't do your homework, I'm gonna eat the candy. And I was like, no, no, like
Oh,
don't ever like. And I still have that candy's probably 20 years old somewhere in my apartment, and it is so disgusting. But like the other thing that was pretty funny that a lot of people can't say is, uh, his oldest son Jeffrey is the exact same age as me, and so we played basketball against each other a few times. So Michael Jordan actually has watched me play basketball.
how nerve-wracking was that
Oh,
experience?
that was like the craziest thing. I'm like, you just like look in the stands like it was like your own parent. Like, oh, did Mike watch that? Did Mike see me do that?
So you were trying to show off, and were you able to show off?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, Jeffrey was better than I was, for sure, and his team was better than I was. But it was still like surreal having like Michael Jordan and like as a 14-year-old watch your basketball games.
Yeah, not everybody can say that. What a treat that is, and a story you will be able to tell for a lifetime. Wrapping up here with Goldie, as they call you, right? Is that
You
what the
call me Goldie, yeah.
is
It's
that
my
Goldie?
my
Okay,
work
let's.
nickname.
I want to be in the cool crowd. So I'm going to call you Goldie
Go for it.
with Fox, and he joins me. I'm Bryan Fenley. How did you stumble upon going to UCLA? You said you were from the Midwest, and I know you are very much transfixed with this basketball program. And as we tape this, they're getting ready to play in the Final Four. But where did it lead you into your life to get to UCLA?
Honestly, it's super weird because like growing up, I never thought about UCLA, and actually USC. I remember watching the Rose Bowl when I was growing up, and watching them dominating football, and like I was a huge Duke fan. So as weird as that's gonna sound, like I was after Michael Jordan retired, I got really into college basketball, and I became this huge Duke fan. And so like 1999 team, I was like, oh, I want to go to Duke. I want to go to Duke. And then we actually ended up moving to North Carolina for a few years. And I was like, I don't want to go to Duke. So finished, or I was like halfway through high school there. And then we moved to California. And I was like, okay, LA is pretty awesome. And so I only applied to one school, this is true, and it was UCLA. And if I didn't get in, I was just going to stay at community college and try again next year. And so I knew UCLA was like the perfect school for me, at that time. And it's go Bruins. It's been a magical run, and I enjoyed my time there.
Final question. Josh Goldman with us. Mick Cronin, what do you like most about that guy?
I like that they went with the unsexy hire. Like he was a guy that like you're gonna get the best out of his. Like he gets the best out of his teams. Like you squeeze every ounce of juice out of that orange with Mick Cronin. Like they lost a first round pick to the G League. They lost their best player to a torn ACL, and like there's a reason they've been underdogs in 4 of the last 5 games during this tournament run, and they're winning. Like honestly, for being 100% honest, I thought Michigan State was going to beat them. I didn't think BYU was going to beat them, but I thought Alabama was going to beat them. I thought Michigan was going to beat them. Definitely think Gonzaga is going to beat them. And he just brings this intensity and gets every little ounce out of these guys. It's crazy. And like, um, I've actually had the lucky privilege of playing against some of these guys at random pickup basketball games at Wooden,
Yeah.
and just seeing how much like they've grown over the last 2 years is insane. And I think that's all goes down to Mick Cronin.
Yeah. He gets stuff out of his players, a talent that you don't see other coaches do. And that's why it's so hard to just when you look at how UCLA matches up with a team, you can't just base it on okay, because they're undersized, they might not be as experienced, but there are these intangibles that you can't really judge on paper that Mick
Mhm.
Cronin has with his players. And so it looks like an upset to many because of how the matchup looks like on paper. But like you said, there's this sheer will and this toughness that you can't measure that Mick Cronin gets out of his guys that allows them to play and compete with anybody. Josh Goldman, a stats junkie, a UCLA Bruin, works for Fox, does amazing work. Appreciate you coming on and telling your story. I'm Bryan Fenley. I'm loving all those jerseys, by the way, behind you, especially the fact that you've got some Redick, you've got some Chris Paul there, Kevin Durant. I saw you have a selfie with Kevin Durant. I should have asked you about
I
that.
Yeah, that was another random UCLA pickup. He was working out, and I was just one day. He just was walking out, and my friend's like, "Yo, can I get a picture?" And he's like, he just grabs my friend's phone and goes. So that's pretty funny. It was very nice of him.
Josh, it was nice of you to do this. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate it, Brian. Anytime.